form was modified for a lot of reasons. One, in 11I, you had the invoices, and you had a distribution zone where you enter information about each line on the invoice as well as the accounting. In 12, you now have 3 zones. You have the header, the lines, and then the distributions. The form looks different. You'll see in the summary, you have a lot more information. There is a new application, services procurement, allows you to do retainage and allocation of prepayments and progress payments, etc., and you can track the status of that on the invoice on the summary page. In 12.2.4, the ability to do retainage also got extended to standard purchase orders. You see up in the top, I have highlighted a field called tax control amount. You'll see that that is a very useful field because taxes are a really big deal in Release 12. And we all know, well, in 12, you click the Calculate Tax button and it calculates the taxes for you based on your tax setup. We all know that can lead to penny round-off errors, which then makes your distribution total not equal to your invoice total. So if you put the tax amount in that tax control amount and the tax engine is off for that tax control amount, it will get rid of or add the penny to the largest line. You off the other box up there where you see remit to supplier, that comes from your third-party relation. If you have one, then you can see who you're actually sending the check to. Over to the left of that screen, you'll see operating unit. It is required for operating unit to be the first field on the screen because of the multi-org access control. It's a folder form. Doesn't matter where you move it, that's where the form is going to open. So don't annoy yourself. Leave it as the first field. You can shorten it. Next one is customer tax ID. That is actually the legal entity. Each operating unit in Release 12 is attached to a default legal entity. However, you can override that default legal entity and make it any legal entity you want. Next screen. We have, as I mentioned, we have distribution and we have lines. Note in Release 12 to ease the burden, and also because a lot of lines only have one distribution, you still can, on the line tab, enter a distribution account. You don't have to go down to the distributions for your one line type entries. I have an all distributions, which allows you to see all distributions across all lines. So they kind of left you with the best of both worlds. Next slide. You also see that allocations become really cool now. If you want to do a miscellaneous allocation, then enter the amount of the allocation or freight. You can enter the amount of the freight of the miscellaneous allocation and say allocate across all lines, certain lines, by percentage, by amount, whatever. Entering only one line, and it'll actually generate, as you see there, the multiple distributions based on how you're doing the allocation. So it handles the allocations much better. Next slide. So this new form is actually, people get it. People open it up and they get it. The problem is it impacts tax, it impacts allocation, it impacts matching. One of the things in the matching is if you're using projects and your purchase order references a project information, on the matched line, you can change anything about that project information except the project number. Next slide. Changes. The ability to make changes to invoices in R12 is different than 11I. I suggest you read that MetaLink note. And the restriction to making changes increases at validated in accounting. Once you have matched to a purchase order, in order to make changes, you've got to discard the line and then rematch. I strongly suggest that you look at folders for both, especially for the lines and also for the headers tab. They added so many new fields to the lines form that if I'm giving this in presentation, I'll point out to the street and said it goes out to the street, and I'm only slightly exaggerating.